The first thing Ethan noticed wasn't the antiseptic smell of the medical tent, or the distant hum of generators. It was the strange tingling sensation crawling up both his arms, like liquid fire under his skin. He pushed himself upright on the narrow cot, immediately regretting the sudden movement as his head spun. The walls of the tent swayed slightly, and he pressed his palms against his temples, trying to steady himself. When he pulled his hands away, he froze. Intricate patterns of soft blue light traced along his forearms, pulsing gently like a heartbeat made visible. The marks weren't painful, but they felt alive, warm against his skin. They resembled circuit patterns or maybe some kind of organic root system, branching and intertwining from his wrists to his elbows. "What the hell?" he muttered, turning his arms to examine the strange phenomenon from different angles. The tent flap rustled, and she entered Kalari, the alien envoy who had been assigned to their reconnaissance unit 3 weeks ago. Her pale purple skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and her dark curly hair framed a face that managed to be both ethereal and remarkably human-like. She moved with that peculiar grace all Mithrans possessed, as if gravity affected her differently. But today, something was different about her demeanor. Instead of her usual composed distance, her luminous amber eyes held something that looked almost like relief. "You're awake," she said softly, her voice carrying that melodic quality that had initially unnerved the entire squad. "I wasn't certain you would survive the transition." Transition? Ethan held up his marked arms. "What is this? Some kind of infection from the radiation storms?" Kalari approached slowly, her gaze fixed on the glowing patterns. When she was close enough, she reached out tentatively, then stopped just short of touching him. "May I?" He nodded, still too confused to object. Her fingertips barely grazed the edge of one of the marks, and the moment she made contact, both patterns flared brighter. Ethan gasped at the sudden warmth that flooded through him, not painful, but intensely intimate, as if she had touched something far deeper than his skin. "It's starting," Kalari whispered, her voice filled with wonder and something else he couldn't identify. "You survived the bonfire. That means your body is accepting the change." She looked up at him with those impossible eyes. "You're becoming one of us." "Bonfire," Ethan's voice cracked. "I don't remember any." "You wouldn't." She interrupted gently. "You were unconscious when I performed the ritual." 3 days passed before Kalari finally explained what had really happened. During the electrical storm that had separated Ethan from his unit, the lightning wasn't natural. She began, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his temporary quarters, a small prefab unit the medical team had assigned him after the marks proved to be permanent. Mithra storms carry spiritual energy. They can kill humans instantly. Ethan flexed his fingers, watching the blue patterns pulse along his forearms. The marks had grown more intricate, spreading in delicate spirals toward his shoulders. "But I'm still alive, because I bonded with you." Kalari's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "It's an ancient ritual, older than our recorded history. When two souls are joined during a bonfire, they share life force, consciousness, everything." He looked up sharply. "You said it was temporary." "I lied." Her amber eyes met his, and, for the first time since he'd known her, she looked vulnerable. "I hoped it would be. The ritual has never been performed between our species before. But the bond..." She gestured helplessly. "It's permanent, Ethan, and it's growing stronger." As if to prove her point, a sudden wave of emotion washed over him, not his own feelings, but hers. Guilt, fear, and underneath it all, something deeper and more complex that made his breath catch. "You can feel it too," she said, noting his expression. He stood abruptly, pacing to the small window. "This is insane. You're telling me we're, what, psychically linked?" "More than that." She rose gracefully, moving closer. "Our life forces are intertwined. Your enhanced senses, the way colors seem brighter now. Sounds clearer. That's my Nithran heritage bleeding through the bond." It was true. Everything seemed more vivid lately, almost overwhelming in its intensity. And sometimes, in quiet moments, he caught glimpses of thoughts that weren't his own, flashes of an alien world with purple skies and crystalline cities. "There's something else," Kalari continued, now standing close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The physical proximity helps stabilize the bond. When we're apart, it hurts. Ethan turned to face her, suddenly understanding why she'd been staying so close these past few days. How much does it hurt? Instead of answering, she reached out and took his hand. The moment their skin touched, relief flooded through both of them so intense, it was almost euphoric. The constant low-level ache he'd been experiencing, which he'd attributed to his transformation, vanished completely. Like that, she whispered. They stood there, hands joined, sharing something far more intimate than touch, through the bond. He could feel her pulse matching his, her breath synchronizing with his own. Over the following week, the changes accelerated. The luminous marks now traced intricate patterns across Ethan's chest and back, creating a living tapestry of blue light beneath his skin. Each new addition brought waves of discomfort that left him gasping and feverish. Kailari never left his side during these episodes. She would press her palms against the newly formed patterns, and somehow her touch would ease the burning sensation, transforming pain into something that felt almost pleasurable. "It's beautiful," she murmured one evening as she traced the latest additions with her fingertips. They were alone in his quarters, the base having grown accustomed to her constant presence. Ethan lay on his narrow bed, shirt discarded, as she mapped the new configurations. Her touch sent shivers through him that had nothing to do with the transformation. "Beautiful isn't the word I'd use. Your language lacks the proper term." She settled beside him, her hand resting over his heart, where the marks formed a complex mandala. In Nithran, we call it Velith, the sacred emergence of two souls becoming one. He could feel her emotions through the bond now with startling clarity: wonder, protectiveness, and a growing affection that mirrored his own feelings. The military psychologist would probably call it Stockholm Syndrome, but this felt deeper, more fundamental. "What happens when it's complete?" he asked. "I don't know." Her honesty was refreshing after days of medical personnel treating him like a fascinating specimen. No human has ever survived this long into the bonding process. That night, as another wave of transformation racked his body, something shifted between them. Kailari held him through the worst of it, her cool skin soothing his fever, her presence anchoring him when he felt like he might dissolve into pure energy. When the episode passed, they remained entwined, breathing heavily. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice carrying undertones he'd never heard before. He turned to meet her gaze, and suddenly her lips were on his. The kiss was electric, not metaphorically, but literally, as the marks along his arms flared bright, enough to illuminate the darkened room. Through the bond, he felt her surprise at her own boldness, followed immediately by a surge of desire that took his breath away. When they broke apart, both were trembling. "The bond," she said shakily, "it's affecting us both more than I anticipated. Is that a problem?" She studied his face in the blue glow emanating from his skin. "It means we're past the point of no return." The transmission from Earth Command arrived 2 weeks later, crackling through the communication array with unmistakable authority. "Soldier Voss is to be extracted immediately for medical evaluation and containment. Transport departs in 72 hours. Ethan stared at the official orders, the words blurring as anger surged through him, not all of it his own. Through the bond, he felt Kailari's distress like a physical blow. "Containment," she repeated, the word heavy with disgust. "They speak of you like a disease." The marks had completed their migration across his torso, and were beginning to trace delicate patterns along his neck. His transformation was nearly complete, and with it had come abilities he was still learning to control. Enhanced strength, the ability to see electromagnetic fields, and most remarkably, limited telepathic communication with Kailari. "They're afraid." Her voice whispered directly into his mind. "They should be." He responded the same way. Surprised by his own vehemence, Colonel Hayes found them in the observation deck later that evening. "Voss, we need to talk." Ethan didn't turn from the viewport, where he'd been watching Nithra's twin moons rise. "About my imminent dissection. About your future." Hayes's voice carried the weight of command, but also something that might have been sympathy. "Son, you're not fully human anymore. That makes you valuable to some people and dangerous to others." "And which are you, sir?" "I'm practical." Hayes moved to stand beside him. That alien of yours, Kalari, she's not just some envoy, is she? Ethan finally looked at his commanding officer. What do you mean? My xenobiology team ran some scans. Her genetic markers indicate high-level nobility, possibly royal bloodline. Hayes studied Ethan's reaction. She didn't mention that. Through the bond, Ethan felt Kalari's sharp spike of anxiety from where she waited in his quarters. That night, after Hayes left, Ethan confronted her. Princess, Kalari sat gracefully on his bed, her composure intact but her emotions churning, with guilt through their connection. I am the third daughter of the Nithran sovereignty. My people sent me to establish diplomatic relations with your species, and instead you bonded with a random human soldier. You weren't random, she stood, moving to him with that fluid grace. During the storm, when I found you dying, the bonfire chose you. I had no control over it. Her hands found his face, thumbs tracing the new marks that had appeared along his jawline. But I'm glad it did. The kiss that followed was desperate, filled with the knowledge that they had so little time. When they made love that night, it was with the intensity of two people facing an impossible choice, their bond flaring so brightly that anyone passing by his quarters would have seen the light bleeding through the walls. The transport shuttle sat on the landing pad, its engines warming for departure. Ethan stood at the base of the ramp, his few possessions in a single duffel bag, knowing that stepping aboard would mean leaving behind everything he'd become. The separation will kill us both, Kalari said quietly beside him. She wore formal Nithran robes for the first time since he'd known her deep purple fabric. That seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, not immediately, but slowly. The bond requires proximity to sustain itself. Colonel Hayes approached with the extraction team. Time to go, Voss. Ethan looked at the shuttle, then at Kalari, feeling the weight of two worlds pulling him in different directions. Through the bond, he sensed her preparing to let him go, her love for him overwhelming her own survival instincts. No, the single word carried such finality that everyone stopped moving. Sir. Hayes stepped closer. I'm not going. Ethan dropped his bag and took Kalari's hand, feeling the immediate relief as their bond stabilized. I'm staying on Nithra. Son, you'll be branded a deserter. You can never return to Earth. Then Earth isn't my home anymore. Hayes studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Your choice, soldier. Make it count. 3 months later, Ethan stood in the crystal halls of the Nithran sovereignty's capital city, wearing robes that complemented Kalari's own. The transformation was complete. The marks now covered most of his body, in intricate patterns that pulsed with soft light, and his connection to Kalari had deepened beyond anything he'd imagined possible. The council has approved our bonding ceremony, Kalari announced, her joy radiating through their link. You'll be recognized as my consort and given full citizenship rights. And Earth, the sovereignty has agreed to establish a permanent embassy. Who better to lead it than the first human Nithran hybrid? She smiled. That expression he'd grown to love beyond measure. You've become exactly what both our peoples needed, a bridge between worlds. That evening, in their shared chambers overlooking the city's luminescent gardens, they lay entwined as they had so many times before. But now there was no urgency, no fear of separation. The bond hummed between them with perfect harmony. Two souls that had found their completion in each other. Do you regret it? Kalari asked, tracing the patterns along his chest that now perfectly complemented her own natural markings. Ethan pulled her closer, marveling at how completely she fit against him. Never. You saved my life in more ways than one. Outside their window, Nithra's twin moons cast silver light over their new world, a world where love had transcended species, where two different forms of life had become something entirely new and wonderful. And in the quiet of the alien night, they made their own magic.